Thank you very much, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm happy to be here today, and also that I have given the opportunity to talk about the actually giving you a kind of broader perspective. If I look at the global economy, the big changes that are taking place right now, and the implications for many countries and also for the world economy going forward. You can see the title of my presentation, Navigating this kind of new geoeconomic universe. I think it's so important that we understand the very big changes that have taken place the last couple of years, because I think that will also have lots of implications for the future. If I should describe to you how I look upon the world economy right now, I must say that we have a high level of complexity. Just to describe to you what you will find in my head right now, I can tell you that there are lots of things. Just a couple of examples. And of course, if I have a couple of hours and maybe a couple of weeks, then I can go through all these kind of different subjects and talk about them. But I don't have that. But what I think, what we are dealing with right now, that is this kind of interaction between different kind of economic developments, different financial developments, and also different political developments. And all together, you can call it geoeconomics. And for me, as an economist, trying to understand the world and thinking about the future, how the economy will develop, I think it's so important that we understand this kind of new area, geoeconomics. Looking at the situation right now and this kind of interplay between the economic situation and the geopolitical situation, I think that will create the balance of power in the world economy. And the balance of power is changing. And we have to understand how the balance of power will change in the future, because otherwise it will create uncertainty, and that could also create tensions between countries. And that could be negative for the global economy going forward. But when you see this kind of interaction between the economic situation and also the political situation, just to look at the different drivers for the economic situation right now, we have seen this kind of huge globalization in the world economy the last 10, 15 years. And of course, we have seen globalization before, but we have never seen this kind of speed of globalization. It's very impressive, and I think it's very good for the world economy. But it's changing, once again, the economic situation for the world economy, and is also changing the balance of power. At the same time, after the collapse of the Lehman Brothers, we have also lots of problems, especially in Europe, and also in the US. We have a record high level of indebtedness. And that means that many countries today, they don't have any flexibility at all to deal with maybe future potential problems. And this will also have lots of impact on the economic developments. We have new role for states and also for central banks. We can look at some countries around the globe becoming much more important for the global economy, and they are very much state-driven. And today, looking at central banks, you could say that central banks are in the driver's seats for the world economy. They are printing money, they are cutting interest rates. This is a new environment when we have this kind of interaction from the government agencies to very different, that is a very different situation compared to what we have seen in the last maybe 10, 15 years. And then finally, demographic changes. We have aging populations in many countries, and that will also have impact on the labor supply and your possibilities to grow going forward. On the political side, unfortunately, I see, especially in Europe, signs of more nationalism. Maybe due to the fact that we have poor economic growth, still high unemployment rates. I also see rising inequalities in many countries. And this will increase tensions within countries, and that could also make some countries more inward-looking. And what we need right now, that is, of course, that we work more closely together around the globe to increase even more globalization. Democracy. We can see several countries driving for more democracy. That is very good. But that is also changing the landscape. And that is also creating, at least in the short term, more political uncertainty. And finally, the access to natural resources. Right now, we are focusing a lot on, of course, the access to energy. You have the discussion about shale gas, shale oil. That is changing the energy landscape. And that means also that you are changing the political landscape. So we have to be aware of these kind of changes taking place right now, because if we don't understand the changes, that will add more uncertainty. And that could also create a negative factor for global economic growth. Looking at the global economy right now, quite impressive. If you look at these two lines, it shows the share of, you have emerging markets and developing economies on the one hand, and you have the advanced economies on the other hand. Just the year just before the Lehman collapse, the size of these two regions were the same. But today, if you look into the future in the next 5 years, it's going to change dramatically. This is very interesting. And looking into the future, where will you find economic growth? That will be in Asia. That will be in India. And of course, China and some other Asian countries. And we have to understand where is the growing force in the future. Just to take a look at the numbers. Share of the world economy, Asia Pacific. If you look at the situation in 1995, roughly 30% of the global economy. And in 2020, roughly 50% of the economy. And you can look at the situation for North and South America, declining, and also Europe. We have to understand these kind of very big changes taking place right now. At the same time, a kind of reflection, I also see this kind of fragile societies that could add uncertainty to the global economy. And that means that you will see governments coming under pressure, and also it means that governments will turn more inwards. And that is not good for the global economy. Looking at this rising, what I would like to call rising socio-economic inequality between countries, I will say it's declining. That is good. But if I look at within countries, it's rising. And this reflects, I will say, the economic policies that we have seen the last couple of years. We have seen austerity measures, especially in the US and also in Europe. It means that people will become unemployed. At the same time, you have central banks printing money, cutting interest rates, that is, because they're injecting more money into asset price markets. And that is good for some households. So it's good that we see this kind of declining economic inequalities between countries, but we have to be aware of the rising inequalities within each country. Growing nationalism, as I said before, due to anemic economic growth, which means that we are going to have high unemployment rates. And then, of course, I'm thinking especially on Europe. I'm very concerned about Europe going forward. And at the same time, we also see some kind of federalistic thinking within the euro area. They are trying to create the United States of the euro. I think maybe that is a good thing in the long-term perspective. But right now, if you look at what people would like to have in Europe, that is not more federalism. They would like to have more independence. And that could add uncertainty and also growing nationalism. But what I think is very good, that is that we see also that some countries are moving towards more democracy. That is good in a kind of long-term perspective, but of course in the short term it could add some uncertainty. We have, I will say, a new era of strategic competition. And unfortunately, I also see some early signs of, you say, retreat from this kind of global multilateralism. If you look at the IMF, the International Monetary Fund today, and the World Bank, I think that some people and some countries are a bit disappointed. Because when they are looking at what the IMF, the World Bank is delivering right now, they are not, could say, fulfilling what people are expecting. People expect strong economic growth, more trade, more financial stability, but so far we have seen very little progress. So that means that we also have, if you go back to one of my previous slides, the changing balance between emerging markets, developing countries, and advanced economies. We have a kind of old infrastructure which doesn't reflect these kind of changes. Thinking about India, China, other emerging market countries, which are becoming much more important and which should have much more influence on this kind of global decision-making. that are taking place right now within the IMF and the World Bank. So what's happening right now, that is that we see some kind of undermining of the Bretton Woods systems. We can see this kind of new BRICS organization taking place, creating this kind of alternative structure. And I think it's good. It's a very good signal that these countries are moving in this direction. But it's not good for the world economy if we are creating these kind of tensions between the BRICS organization and the IMF and the World Bank on the other hand. So we have to keep an eye on that. So just to summarize, I see this kind of increasing interplay between economics and geopolitics. We have to be aware of this kind of the changing balance of power in the world economy. We have to understand these kind of changes because they are building new economic orders, new infrastructures. We are getting new superpowers, new agenda. We have today a situation where if you have economic dependency, you also get much more influence on the world economy. We see this kind of interconnectedness, which means that it's good. It's good for the economic situation, but at the same time, it means also that we are much more sensitive to changes or problems coming up. So I think, maybe I should have said this at the beginning, but maybe some of you have been listening to me before, I am a bit pessimistic about the future. That is a kind of a tradition that I have. I'm a pessimistic economist. And this is maybe why I end up with this kind of conclusion that I think we have to be prepared for a higher level of geopolitical uncertainty going forward. Because my conclusion, that is that we don't yet understand these kind of changes that are taking place within the world economy. And if we don't understand these kind of changes, that will add uncertainty and that will maybe create tensions between countries. Thank you.